The last human battleship above Mars did not explode. It simply stopped moving. Its engines had been offline for 43 minutes, its weapons cold, its hull scarred by impacts. Across the tactical displays of the Imperial cruiser Veyrath, the ship appeared as little more than a drifting piece of metal. Admiral Karen watched it through the command deck glass. Confirmed the surrender signal. Confirmed, Admiral. Karen allowed himself a slow smile. Below them, Mars turned silently beneath a veil of dust. 3 months earlier, the Red Planet had been one of humanity's strongest military positions. Now its orbital defense platforms were destroyed, its shipyards silent, and its remaining fleet scattered across the system. Earth was next. The Galactic Empire had spent 2 centuries expanding across human territory. Humanity had resisted longer than expected, but resistance had become increasingly desperate. The Empire had better ships, better sensors, larger fleets, more advanced weapons. Most importantly, it had experience. Humanity had entered the interstellar community only 87 years earlier. The Empire had been fighting wars for almost 12,000. To Imperial strategists, the outcome had never truly been in doubt. Humanity had simply taken longer to lose. Transmit the final ultimatum, Karen ordered. A communications officer hesitated. The standard surrender terms. No. Karen looked toward the officer. Tell Earth that Mars has fallen. Tell them their remaining fleet has been identified. Tell them that if Earth does not surrender within 48 hours, the Empire will begin planetary bombardment. The officer swallowed. And if they refuse? Karen looked back at Mars. They won't. No one on the bridge questioned him. Humanity had already lost too much. The war had begun with a border dispute. A mining colony on the edge of the Perseus corridor had been claimed by both sides. Imperial officials expected humans to negotiate. Instead, Earth refused. The Empire interpreted that refusal as weakness disguised as pride. The first battle lasted 11 minutes. The second lasted 19. By the end of the first month, humanity had lost 14 colonies. By the end of the first year, it had lost 73. But the strange thing was that Earth never surrendered. The humans retreated. They abandoned worlds. They evacuated cities. They destroyed their own infrastructure rather than allowing it to fall intact. Whenever the Empire captured something important, it found almost nothing useful. Factories had been emptied. Data centers had been wiped. Military depots had been stripped. Even civilian populations had been relocated weeks before Imperial forces arrived. The Empire called it cowardice. Humanity called it survival. For 3 years, that strategy had worked. Then the Empire changed tactics. Instead of chasing human fleets, it attacked their supply chains. Instead of occupying every colony, it destroyed the orbital transfer stations connecting them. Human ships began running out of fuel. Then ammunition. Then replacement parts. The human fleet slowly became smaller. By the 4th year, the Empire controlled almost everything beyond the solar system. Earth remained. But Earth was surrounded. 28 Imperial battle groups occupied the outer system. 6 carrier groups waited near Jupiter. 3 heavy fleets had established positions around Saturn. And above the Moon, the Empire had constructed a massive communications platform designed to coordinate the final assault. Humanity had fewer than 40 operational warships left. The Empire had more than 600. There was no realistic comparison. At least, that was what the Empire believed. On Earth, however, nobody was celebrating. General Elena Verga stood inside the underground command center beneath the Antarctic ice. The room was almost completely dark. There were no grand displays. No ceremonial uniforms. No officers shouting across a bridge. Only people working. Engineers. Strategists. Logistics officers. Communications specialists. Civilian administrators. Most had not slept properly in weeks. Verga stared at the central map. The Imperial fleet appeared as hundreds of red markers surrounding the solar system. Earth was represented by a single blue sphere. A young officer approached her. General. Verga turned. The Empire has transmitted its ultimatum. What are the terms? Surrender within 48 hours. Verga nodded. And the bombardment? Expected immediately afterward. Nobody spoke for several seconds. Then Verga asked the question everyone already knew. How many Imperial ships are currently inside the inner system? 212. And ours? 37 confirmed operational. 37? Yes, General. Verga looked at the map. Then we are almost ready. The officer stared at her. Almost. Verga nodded. Begin Phase 7. The officer's expression changed. For the first time, there was something in his eyes that looked almost like relief. He turned toward the communications console. Phase 7 authorization confirmed. Across the underground facility, encrypted systems came alive. Deep beneath the oceans, dormant reactors began receiving commands. Inside abandoned military bases, sealed doors unlocked. In mountain tunnels that had supposedly been empty for decades, machinery began moving. On the far side of the moon, buried beneath kilometers of rock, an automated network awakened. And beneath the Earth's oceans, something much larger began to rise. The Empire had spent 4 years watching humanity's military disappear. It had mistaken disappearance for destruction. It had never asked where the missing resources had gone. At 3:17 Universal Time Coordinated, the first signal left Antarctica. It traveled through cables, satellites, buried transmitters, and hardened communication nodes. The message contained only 6 words. Begin the final defense of Earth. At the same moment, across the solar system, thousands of hidden systems answered. The Empire had believed humanity's remaining army numbered fewer than 40 ships. That number was correct. Those were simply the only ships humanity had allowed the Empire to see. The Imperial fleet began moving toward Earth 12 hours after the ultimatum. From the perspective of Imperial Command, the operation was almost routine. The main assault force would enter the inner system, suppress Earth's remaining orbital defenses, and force the planet's governments to surrender. There was no expectation of a prolonged battle. Admiral Karen had already prepared his victory report. It described humanity as a technologically capable but strategically immature civilization. The report praised Imperial logistics. It credited superior fleet coordination. It mentioned human bravery, but only briefly. Karen considered that an appropriate final compliment. Then his intelligence officer entered the command room. "Admiral, we have a problem." Karen didn't look up. "What kind?" "We've detected energy activity on Earth." "Military?" "We don't know." "Then identify it." "We're trying." Karen finally turned. "What exactly are you seeing?" The officer placed a display on the table. At first, there was nothing unusual. Earth had always produced enormous amounts of energy. Its cities remained active. Its industries continued operating. But now something was different. The planet's electrical grid was changing. Power was being diverted. Not toward cities. Not toward factories. Toward remote regions. The officer highlighted several locations. Antarctica. The Pacific seabed. Northern Canada. Siberia. The Atlantic floor. Karen frowned. "Mining?" "No." "Then what?" "We don't know." Karen dismissed it. "Probably emergency infrastructure." The officer hesitated. "Admiral, there are thousands of these sites." Karen stared at the display. Thousands? That number bothered him. Earth had spent years under blockade. Its industrial capacity had been heavily damaged. It should not have possessed the resources for thousands of major construction sites. "Scan them." "We already did." "And?" The officer looked uncomfortable. "Most are shielded." Karen's expression hardened. "Nothing on Earth is invisible to Imperial sensors." "That was true before." "What changed?" "We don't know." That answer irritated him. But the fleet was already moving. So Karen ordered the scans repeated and returned to the operation. 20 minutes later, the first Imperial reconnaissance group entered Earth's orbital zone. It expected missile batteries. Instead, it found nothing. No launch signatures. No active fighter wings. No major warship formations. Earth appeared defenseless. The reconnaissance commander reported immediately. "Orbital space is clear." Karen smiled. "Excellent." Then the sensor officer spoke. "Wait." The bridge became silent. "What?" "I'm detecting something." "Where?" "Below us." "Ground installations." "No." The officer zoomed in. "Under the ocean." The Imperial commander frowned. "How deep?" "Very deep." "Military installation?" The officer's hands moved rapidly across the controls. "Unknown." Then the ocean moved. Not the water. Something beneath it. A massive structure broke through the Pacific surface. Imperial sensors immediately identified it as artificial. It was almost 3 kilometers long. It had no conventional engine signature. No visible weapons. No communications beacon. It simply rose from the ocean. Then another structure appeared. Then another. Within 6 minutes, 24 enormous platforms had surfaced. The Imperial Bridge erupted into activity. Those weren't there. They were. Impossible. They were concealed. By what? Unknown technology. Karen watched the images. The structures were unlike human warships. They looked more like industrial platforms. Huge armored cylinders surrounded by rotating rings. What are they? Nobody answered. Then one of the structures opened. A launch sequence began. Dozens of objects accelerated into the sky. They were small. Too small to be warships. Karen almost laughed. Fighters? Possibly. How many? The sensor officer stopped speaking. Admiral? I'm waiting. 300. Karen's smile disappeared. The objects climbed through Earth's atmosphere without producing the expected heat signatures. Their surfaces were covered in material designed to absorb radar and infrared energy. They were not advanced enough to be invisible. They were simply difficult to detect. The Imperial fleet had not been facing technological magic. It had been facing preparation. The fighters spread across the sky. Then the human communications network activated. For the first time in 4 years, a message was transmitted openly across the solar system. This is Earth Defense Command. The voice was calm. We are not requesting negotiations. Karen stared at the speakers. The message continued. All Imperial forces inside the solar system are ordered to withdraw immediately. The bridge erupted in laughter. Even Karen smiled. Humans are surrendering. No, Admiral. The communications officer looked confused. They're giving us an order. Karen laughed again. Open a channel. The connection was established. This is Admiral Karen of the Galactic Empire, he said. You are surrounded. Your military has been destroyed. Your surrender is mandatory. The human voice answered. You are mistaken. Karen leaned forward. About what? About what you destroyed. The transmission ended. Seconds later, the first human missiles launched. They did not target the Imperial fleet. They targeted the communications platform above the moon. The platform vanished in a controlled explosion. Across the solar system, Imperial ships lost coordination. For a few seconds, the fleet was blind. Then another signal appeared. This one came from Earth. Phase 7 complete. And beneath the Pacific, the remaining doors opened. The Empire's first mistake was assuming the human military was built around ships. It wasn't. Humanity had learned during the first year of the war that large fleets were expensive, visible, and difficult to replace. So Earth had changed the structure of its defense. Instead of building everything into warships, humans distributed military capability across thousands of locations. Factories were hidden inside mountains. Weapons systems were buried beneath deserts. Fuel reserves were stored beneath the ocean floor. Repair facilities were constructed inside old asteroid mines. Military drones were scattered across the solar system. The goal was simple. If the Empire destroyed one part of humanity's military, another part would survive. The strategy had been developed by General Elena Verga after the fall of Luna. She called it distributed defense. The Empire called it inefficient. For 4 years, Imperial intelligence had watched humanity follow the same pattern. Lose. Retreat. Disappear. Rebuild somewhere else. They believed the humans were running out of options. In reality, humanity had been running out of visible options. The hidden ones were growing. Above Earth, Imperial fleets attempted to reorganize. Without the lunar communications platform, their formations became less coordinated. But the Empire still possessed overwhelming numbers. Hundreds of ships remained. The human fighters attacked anyway. They did not attempt to destroy the largest warships. They targeted sensors, engines, communications arrays, fuel ships, repair vessels, anything that kept the Imperial fleet functioning. It was not glamorous warfare. It was logistics. Within 20 minutes, the Empire lost 47 support vessels. Karen realized what was happening. They're not trying to defeat the fleet. His tactical officer looked at him. They're dismantling it. Karen's face tightened. Destroy their carriers. The Imperial fleet responded. Heavy cruisers moved toward the human platforms. Their weapons fired. The first buried defense structure disappeared beneath a cloud of debris. Then another. But the Empire's weapons had to strike what they could see. The human defenses were designed to disappear immediately after firing. Missiles launched from underwater. Railguns fired from mountains. Drones emerged from hidden tunnels. Then vanished. The Imperial fleet began shooting at empty coordinates. Humanity was forcing the Empire to spend ammunition faster than it could replenish it. On Earth, General Verga watched the battle through a hardened command center. Status: Pacific platforms are still operational. Arctic network: 80%. Lunar relays: gone. Verga nodded. That was expected. An officer looked at her. General, they're adapting. Of course they are. Their battleships are moving toward the Atlantic platforms. Then activate the Atlantic Reserve. The officer hesitated. That's the old fleet. Verga looked at him. I know. The old fleet consisted of ships that the Empire believed had been destroyed. Some were damaged vessels recovered from previous battles. Others were civilian transports rebuilt into combat ships. A few had never entered combat. They had been hidden in underground caverns and asteroid facilities. Their weapons were not revolutionary. Their armor was not superior. But they were numerous. At 8:42 Universal Time Coordinated, the Atlantic Reserve launched. 72 human ships rose from hidden facilities. They were ugly compared with Imperial cruisers. Some had exposed engine sections. Others carried mismatched armor plates. Their hulls showed years of repair. But they were operational. The Empire sensor network detected them. For the first time, Imperial commanders realized the numbers were wrong. Humanity did not have 37 ships. It had hundreds. Then the sensor network detected another group. And another. And another. Karen watched the numbers increase. 100. 200. 300. The Imperial bridge became silent. Where did they come from? Nobody knew. Then the human fleet entered formation. It was not a beautiful formation. There were no perfect lines. No massive flagship at the center. Instead, the ships spread across the system in independent groups. Each group had its own command. Each could operate without the others. The Empire had prepared for a battle. Humanity had prepared for a campaign. That difference became obvious within the next hour. Human ships refused direct engagements. They struck isolated Imperial units, withdrew, changed direction, and attacked somewhere else. Imperial commanders tried to concentrate their forces. Every time they did, human drones attacked their supply lines. They tried to protect their carriers. Human missiles targeted their escorts. They tried to pursue human ships. Those ships retreated toward defensive zones. The Empire had superior individual vessels. Humanity had created a system that made individual superiority less important. Karen finally understood the hidden strategy. Earth isn't trying to win one battle. His tactical officer looked at him. No. They're trying to make us lose the war. The officer nodded. Below them, Earth remained silent. Its cities were darkened. Its population had spent years living under rationing. Millions of civilians were still in shelters. Humanity had not suddenly become stronger than the Empire. It had simply stopped fighting the Empire's war. And the next phase was about to begin. At 11:15 Universal Time Coordinated, the Empire launched its largest attack. 200 heavy warships moved toward Earth. Behind them came carrier groups, troop transports, missile platforms, and electronic warfare vessels. The objective was no longer negotiation. It was occupation. The Empire intended to break Earth's remaining defenses in a single concentrated assault. General Verga watched the fleet approach. Estimated time to engagement: 26 minutes. Civilian evacuation status: completed in all designated zones. Then we proceed. An officer looked at her. General, we have one more problem. What? Our outer defense lines are collapsing. Verga nodded. They were never supposed to hold. The officer stared at her. Then why build them? To make the Empire believe they were our final defenses. She turned toward the main display. Now show them the real one. Deep beneath the Antarctic ice, the final doors opened. 4 decades, the facility had been classified as a climate research complex. It had no military insignia. No visible weapons. No orbital launch capability. But below the research stations was a network of tunnels extending hundreds of kilometers. Inside those tunnels were ships. Not hundreds. Thousands. Small combat vessels. Cargo ships converted into missile carriers. Rescue craft fitted with defensive systems. Drone carriers. Electronic warfare platforms. Autonomous supply vessels. Humanity had not built a secret superweapon. It had built something more dangerous. A sustainable military. The first wave launched from Antarctica. The second emerged from the Pacific. The third launched from Siberia. The fourth came from hidden lunar facilities. The fifth came from asteroid bases. The human fleet appeared throughout the solar system. The Empire sensor network struggled to track them. There were too many. Karen watched the numbers. 3,000. The sensor officer shook his head. 4,000. Impossible. 5,000. Karen stood. Stop counting. The officer continued anyway. 5,600. The room went silent. But Verga knew those numbers did not represent 5,000 battleships. Most were small. Many were drones. Some were barely more than engines carrying missiles. Humanity had not created an armada capable of defeating the Empire in a straight battle. It had created an army capable of surviving long enough to make victory impossible for the invader. The first Imperial battleship entered Earth's defensive zone. Human missiles struck. Its shields held. A second wave followed. The ship survived. Then its engines failed. A human drone had attacked the thermal control system. The ship was not destroyed. It was simply no longer a participant in the battle. That became the pattern. Humanity disabled. Separated. Isolated. Captured. Destroyed only when necessary. Imperial commanders began losing ships without understanding why. Then something unexpected happened. Human boarding craft approached an Imperial cruiser. The Imperial commander assumed they intended to destroy it. Instead, the humans transmitted a message. Your reactor is unstable. Shut it down. The Imperial captain refused. 30 seconds later, the cruiser suffered a containment failure. The human boarding craft intercepted the crew. They rescued them. The Imperial captain could not understand it. You're fighting us. Yes. You're saving us. Yes. Why? The human commander answered. Because the war is with your government. Not your children. The transmission ended. That story spread through the Imperial fleet. Some crews continued fighting. Others began questioning their orders. The Empire had expected humans to become desperate. Instead, humanity had become disciplined. The battle lasted 17 hours. By sunset over Europe, the Imperial assault had stalled. The Empire had lost 140 ships. Humanity had lost more than 300. But the difference was that human losses could be replaced. The Empire's could not. Imperial ships were produced in enormous factories far from the solar system. Their supply lines stretched across thousands of light years. Human ships were repaired locally. Their parts came from civilian factories. Their crews were trained through distributed systems. Their military had become an ecosystem. At 3 o'clock Universal Time Coordinated, Karen received a message from Imperial High Command. Withdraw. He read it twice. The Empire had never ordered a retreat from Earth. Not once. Then another message arrived. Immediate withdrawal. Karen looked toward the planet. For the first time, Earth did not look weak. It looked patient. And that frightened him more than any weapon. The Empire began retreating. But the human fleet did not chase immediately. General Verga ordered her commanders to hold position. Many officers questioned the decision. We can pursue them. We can destroy their carriers. We can cripple the fleet. Verga shook her head. No, General. Let them go. The room became quiet. They'll regroup. Yes. They'll return. Maybe. Verga looked at the tactical display. We need them to return. The officers did not understand. Verga explained. For 4 years, humanity had fought to survive. Now it needed something else. It needed the Empire to understand that Earth was no longer a target that could be conquered. The retreating Imperial fleet carried thousands of survivors. Those survivors would return to Imperial space. They would tell their families what happened. They would tell commanders that humanity had not been destroyed. They would tell them Earth had built a defense system that could not be defeated by conventional invasion. Most importantly, they would tell them that humanity was not seeking revenge. That mattered. Because the war had begun with fear. The Empire feared a new civilization becoming influential. Humanity feared being controlled. Both sides had mistaken fear for certainty. Now the war had reached a point where continuing it would destroy both. 3 days after the Imperial retreat, Earth transmitted a message to the galaxy. It was not a victory speech. There was no threat. No demand for territory. No declaration of human supremacy. General Verga delivered it herself. Humanity does not claim ownership of the worlds beyond our borders. We do not seek the destruction of the Galactic Empire. We ask only that our sovereignty be recognized. The message continued. If the Empire attacks again, we will defend ourselves. But we will not pursue your civilian populations. We will not destroy your cities. And we will not become what we fought. The message was broadcast across hundreds of systems. The reaction was immediate. Some governments praised humanity. Others accused Earth of manipulating public opinion. The Empire officially called the human defense a temporary military anomaly. But inside Imperial military circles, the story was different. Officers began asking questions. How had Earth built thousands of ships? Why had Imperial intelligence missed them? How many more remained? Nobody knew. Then Imperial analysts discovered something disturbing. The hidden human army was not the largest part of Earth's military potential. The human military was supported by civilian infrastructure. Factories could switch production in days. Merchant ships could become supply vessels. Mining colonies could provide materials. Agricultural stations could provide food. Research universities could produce military technology. Humanity's greatest weapon was not a fleet. It was its ability to adapt. The Empire had expected war to be decided by ships. Humans understood that war was decided by systems. This was why the Empire had lost. Not because humans had better weapons. They didn't. Not because human soldiers were physically stronger. They weren't. Not because Earth possessed some mysterious technology. It didn't. Humanity had simply learned faster. And now the Empire faced a problem. It could conquer Earth. Perhaps. But doing so would require occupying billions of people across an entire planet. It would require maintaining supply lines. Suppressing resistance. Protecting factories. Securing orbital infrastructure. And doing it for decades. The Empire's military planners finally calculated the cost. The numbers were unacceptable. The Empire could win battles. It could not guarantee victory in the occupation that followed. That distinction changed everything. 6 months later, negotiations began. They were held aboard a neutral station. The Imperial delegation arrived expecting arrogance. Instead, they found tired humans. Verga was there. So was the Imperial commander who had once threatened Earth. Karen. He looked older. Verga offered him a seat. You survived. Karen nodded. So did you. Verga smiled faintly. Apparently. Karen studied her. I want to know something. What? How many ships did you actually have? Verga leaned back. That information is classified. Karen almost smiled. I expected that answer. But I'll tell you something else. He waited. The fleet wasn't the real secret. What was? Verga looked through the station's window toward the stars. We stopped believing that losing meant we were finished. Karen said nothing. That sentence stayed with him. Because he finally understood the mistake the Empire had made. It had measured humanity by what remained visible. It had counted ships, factories, colonies, soldiers. It had never measured determination. 1 year passed without another major battle. The ceasefire held. Trade routes reopened. Human diplomats entered Imperial territory. For the first time, Imperial citizens began visiting Earth. They expected a militarized world. Instead, they saw crowded cities, universities, hospitals, farms, factories, and people trying to rebuild their lives. Humanity had not become an empire. It had become something more complicated. A civilization that had survived an empire. But not everyone in the Galactic Empire accepted the new reality. A faction inside the Imperial military believed the ceasefire had been a humiliation. They called themselves the Restoration Command. Their leader was Marshal Tarek Voss. Voss believed the Empire had made a strategic mistake. Earth is vulnerable, he told the Imperial Council. We simply failed to concentrate enough force. The Council disagreed. Voss ignored them. He secretly assembled a fleet. 300 warships. 100 carriers. thousands of support vessels. He believed Surprise would accomplish what the first invasion had not. The operation was called Hammerfall. The plan was simple. Strike Earth before its defenses could fully mobilize. Destroy the hidden infrastructure. Capture the leadership. Force unconditional surrender. The fleet departed without Imperial authorization. But Earth knew. Human intelligence had improved dramatically during the previous year. The Restoration Command had not been invisible. Its communication traffic had been monitored. Its ship movements tracked. Its supply purchases analyzed. Humanity knew Hammerfall was coming. But General Verga made a controversial decision. Do not intercept them. Her commanders objected. General, they're heading directly for Earth. I know. We should attack first. No. Why? Because this time, the Empire needs to see what happens when it attacks us without being manipulated into it. The human fleet prepared. But it did not deploy thousands of ships. It deployed a smaller force. 180 warships. 300 support craft. Thousands of drones. And the planetary defense network. When Hammerfall entered the solar system, Voss was confident. His fleet advanced toward Earth. Then the stars around him seemed to change. Human ships emerged from hiding. Not hundreds. Thousands. Voss stared at the tactical display. The human fleet had expanded. Factories across the solar system had spent the previous year building replacements. Mining colonies had increased production. Civilian transport networks had been integrated into emergency defense systems. Humanity had not relaxed during peace. It had prepared for the possibility that peace might fail. Voss ordered an attack. The battle lasted 4 hours. The human fleet did not destroy the Restoration forces. It surrounded them. Then it transmitted a message. Your fleet is outnumbered. Voss refused to answer. Your supply ships are disabled. Silence. Your weapon systems are being targeted. Still silence. Then Verga transmitted one final statement. You have an opportunity to leave. Voss laughed. Humanity will never defeat the Empire. Verga answered calmly. We don't need to. What? We only need to survive you. The human fleet began disabling engines. One Imperial ship after another lost power. The Restoration Command had expected a massacre. Instead, humanity was giving them a choice. Withdraw. Surrender. Or continue until nothing remained. Voss finally understood. The humans were not trying to prove they were stronger. They were proving they could not be removed. That was more dangerous. Because strength could be challenged. Persistence had to be endured. The Restoration fleet surrendered. The Imperial Council arrested Voss. The war was officially over. But the galaxy had changed. Humanity had become a symbol. Not because it had conquered the Empire. It had not. Not because it had destroyed the largest fleet in history. It hadn't. Humanity had become a symbol because it had survived something that should have destroyed it. The Empire had thought humanity was finished. Instead, the humans had revealed the truth. They had never needed to become the strongest civilization. They only needed to become impossible to erase. 5 years after the war, the solar system looked different. The scars remained. Abandoned Imperial stations still floated beyond Jupiter. Broken satellites drifted around Mars. Old battlefields marked the edges of human space. But Earth was rebuilding. Cities expanded. Factories reopened. Children who had spent their early years inside shelters were now attending schools. The human fleet had grown larger than anyone expected. But it was no longer the centerpiece of Earth's identity. The military had become smaller in some ways. More efficient in others. Its purpose had changed. Humanity no longer prepared to conquer. It prepared to prevent conquest. The Galactic Empire eventually signed a permanent peace agreement. The treaty recognized human sovereignty. It established shared trade corridors. It created joint rescue protocols. It prohibited orbital bombardment of civilian targets. And it created something neither side had imagined at the beginning of the war. A human Imperial Defense Council. Former enemies now worked together against pirates, rogue military groups, and disasters. Admiral Karen eventually retired. He spent his final years writing his memoirs. In the last chapter, he described the battle above Earth. He wrote about the thousands of hidden ships. The underground factories. The drones. The civilian supply networks. But he wrote something else too. He said the greatest surprise was not the size of Earth's army. It was the fact that humanity had never intended to use it for conquest. The army existed because Earth had learned a lesson. Never again would humanity allow another civilization to decide whether it deserved to survive. The final page of Karen's memoir contained one sentence. The humans did not defeat the Empire by becoming stronger than us, they defeated our certainty that we could make them disappear. Years later, students across the galaxy studied the war. Imperial historians called it the Earth Campaign. Human historians called it the Defense War. Others simply called it the 4-Year War. But soldiers had another name for it. The War of the Empty Battlefield. Because every time the Empire believed it had destroyed humanity's final defense, it discovered another. A hidden shipyard. A buried weapons system. A forgotten colony. A reserve fleet. Another network. Another generation. Not magic. Not impossible technology. Preparation. Adaptation. Sacrifice. And patience. On the anniversary of the final battle, General Elena Verga returned to Antarctica. She was older now. Her military career was over. The enormous underground facilities had been partially dismantled. Some had become museums. Others had been converted into research centers. She walked through one of the old launch chambers with a group of school children. One child looked up at the massive doors. General Verga? Yes? Was this where the secret army was kept? Verga smiled. No. The child looked confused. But everyone says this was where Earth's secret army was. It was. Then why did you say no? Verga looked at the chamber. Because the army was never inside this room. The child frowned. Where was it? Verga pointed toward the ceiling. Up there. On Earth. Everywhere. She explained that the army had been engineers designing stronger reactors. Farmers keeping food production alive. Factory workers rebuilding engines. Scientists developing materials. Pilots flying rescue missions. Mechanics repairing damaged ships. Doctors treating wounded soldiers. Families keeping communities together. The fleet had been only the visible part. The real army had been civilization itself. That was what the Empire had failed to understand. A military could be destroyed. A fleet could be defeated. A capital could be occupied. But if the people behind those things remained capable of rebuilding, the war was not finished. The child looked toward the enormous doors. So humanity won? Verga considered the question. No. The child looked disappointed. Then who won? Verga smiled. Everyone who survived. Outside, the Antarctic wind moved across the ice. Far above the planet, human and imperial ships traveled together through the solar system. They were no longer enemies. But neither civilization had forgotten the lesson. The Empire had once looked at Earth and seen a defeated world. It had counted the ships. It had counted the weapons. It had counted the losses. And it had declared humanity finished. It had been wrong. Because humanity's greatest army had never been waiting in orbit. It had been waiting in factories, laboratories, homes, ships, farms, and underground shelters. It had been waiting in every person who refused to believe that defeat was the same thing as extinction. The Empire had expected Earth to surrender when its last fleet disappeared. Instead, Earth had revealed something the galaxy had never understood. Humanity did not measure survival by the number of battles it could win. It measured survival by whether it could stand again after losing. And when the Empire finally understood that truth, it no longer saw Earth as a conquered planet. It saw Earth as what humanity had quietly become. A civilization that could be pushed back. A civilization that could be wounded. A civilization that could lose. But never again a civilization that could simply be erased. The war had ended. The army remained. Not waiting for another empire. Not waiting for another invasion. Simply waiting as a promise. If the galaxy chose peace, humanity would build with it. If the galaxy chose war, humanity would endure. And that was the part the Galactic Empire had never expected. Earth's greatest army had never been built to conquer the stars. It had been built to make sure humanity would still be there when the stars finally went quiet.